Good evening and welcome to Quorum. I'm Wilson Stribling. We are following the money on tonight's program. Joining us are top lawmakers from the House and Senate Appropriations, Ways and Means, and Finance Committees. We'll discuss how the state gets its money and how lawmakers divide it up each year. We've said it before and we'll underscore it here. Both revenue and spending depend directly on the state's economy. Lawmakers in the House and Senate are hard at work on the 2011 budget. It's complicated work at the Capitol, and it depends in great part on what happens here. Manufacturers like Nissan, Eurocopter, and Caterpillar add great strength to the Mississippi economy. The Mississippi Development Authority continues to bring many high-tech companies to the state, and with those companies come lots of well-paid jobs. That means more tax revenue for Mississippi. But those new jobs and taxes have yet to bolster the state's overall revenue picture. Consider Mississippi's 7% sales tax. It generated more than $1.9 billion back in 2009, about 41% of the state's general fund revenue. Then the recession hit us with full force. Sales tax revenue dropped by 7.3% in fiscal 2010, and it's expected to rise only slightly by the end of fiscal 2012 to $1.8 billion. Then there's the revenue from individual income taxes. They account for about 32% of the state's general fund. But the recession took a heavy toll on taxpayers' income. Annual income tax revenue is expected to fall by $857 million between 2009 and 2012. Top economists in Mississippi warn those big revenue sources may take years to recover to pre-recession levels.
We do see a pickup in employment in the private sector, which is very good, but at the same time, our state budget is having some problems, so that we've seen some layoffs in a few public employees. So that overall, the projection is for a very slow growth rate. The unemployment rate this year is expected to be about 10%, about 9% nationally. So it's just a very slow recovery.
Other revenue sources have also been hit by the economy. A researcher with MSU's Stennis Institute warned House lawmakers this week that the state's gaming industry has been hard hit by the economy. Both gaming taxes and jobs in the industry have fallen off. The single largest revenue source that the Senate and House depend on in any budget year remains the federal government.
Well, we hear more talk about our state general fund budget, but in fact, if you look at the federal monies that we get, half of that total budget comes from the federal government, and a lot of that money will go to health-related programs, for example, particularly Medicaid. We also have a sizable amount of federal funds that are going to the Department of Human Services, to the Department of Employment Security, to Mississippi Development Authority. There's still some Katrina-related funds that go there. Education, particularly special education.
With fiscal concerns at the top of the congressional priority list, state lawmakers may soon face a drop-off in that funding, too. What do regular Mississippians think about the economy? We sought a random sampling of opinions from across the state.
I'm optimistic about the future, but I feel like we're in a pretty dire situation right now, economically, job-wise, the future dealing with foreign relations. I mean, our states could work on budget cuts, but in the long run, we're going to have a lot of help, and I'm not sure where that's going to come from.
I'm optimistic about it. It seems to be looking better this year, so we're hoping, some things turn around.
I think it's rough, yes. I think the economy is not good at this point in time.
I have quite a few friends that's out of work right now, and I try to help them find jobs, keep my ear open and everything. So, yeah, when we're all in it together, so if some of us are down, it kind of pulls on everybody.
We need more jobs, more opportunities, and you can only do that by creating and bringing in manufacturing companies, distributor companies, and distributorships, and so on. But no new taxes right now, I wouldn't think.
We conducted those interviews on the streets of Jackson, Brandon, and Oxford over the last week. And now we turn to our panel of lawmakers. Senator Dean Kirby is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. He's a Republican representing Rankin County. Republican Terry Burton represents the people of Lauderdale, Newton, and Scott counties in the Senate. He's a member of that chamber's Appropriations Committee. From the House, Representative Percy Watson chairs the Ways and Means Committee. He's a Democrat from Forest County. And Representative Cecil Brown is here. The Hinds County Democrat is a member of the House Appropriations Committee, as well as the House Education Chairman. Of course, we want you to join in this conversation. Our toll-free phone line is now open. Dial 1-877-405-5247 with your questions for our guests. That number again, 1-877-405-5247. You can also email your questions to quorum@mpbonline.org. We'll get to as many of those as time allows. And you can also join the discussion on Twitter. Follow us at twitter.com/mpbonline. Now let me begin with Senator Kirby. Now, as Finance Chairman, you get frequent updates on the state's revenue collection. So what can you tell us about how the revenue outlook is shaping up now, Senator?
Wow. Well, much better than last year, but still we have problems. Anytime that you lose $200 million of stimulus money like we have this year, you're going to have problems. But overall, the revenue, we're beginning to see an incline in the revenue compared to a year ago, yet we have a long ways to go.
Representative Watson, would you agree with that assessment?
I would agree with that assessment. Hopefully we have seen the worst. It's getting better. We're having positive returns. People are spending again. People are feeling positive and about the overall situation of the Mississippi economy. So we're optimistic that that things will get better and that we will be able to have an increase in revenue during the remainder of this fiscal year.
Representative Brown, what if that doesn't happen? What if it goes the opposite direction and things do not improve? Could we see further cuts in state spending as a result?
Well, we could be, but of course we're all hopeful that won't happen. I think that it was interesting to watch the people that were interviewed. I think there was more optimism than pessimism in the people on the street, and that's indicative of, I think, what's going on in the economy. People are feeling better about things. I didn't see anybody jumping and shouting that, you know, happy days are here again, but you do feel a little bit better than you did maybe a year or so, 18 months or so ago, and I think that's really positive for the economy.
Senator Burton, what do you foresee? Do you think further cuts could be necessary if things don't improve further?
Well, certainly if things don't improve further, or if they get worse, then you know, we're going to see a static budget. We can't raise the budget numbers if we don't have the money to do that. If things were to take a downturn, then you would see additional cuts. But I agree with my colleagues here. I think things are tough all over right now, but things are turning around, and I think that the average person out there feels there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's a long tunnel, but there's light there, and I don't think it's a freight train this time. I really think it actually is sunlight, and we're going to pull through this thing. It's going to take a lot of effort on our part. We're all members of the Legislative Budget Committee, the four of us here, and we have struggled with trying to make sure that we do the right things as far as our recommendations to the legislature are concerned, and be as flexible with those recommendations as we can, knowing that it's a month-to-month situation until we leave town at the end of the year and have the budget put in place. It's a month-to-month look-and-see attitude.
You were with us last week, and we've been talking about the stimulus money and other one-time monies that are used to complete the joint budget proposal. We counted at least 13 supplemental funding sources, including the Rainy Day Fund. What happens next year? Will those sources be too depleted for us to work with?
Well, I don't want to correct something I said last week. I was a little off. I was off by about $200 million. But you know, what's $200 million among friends? But seriously, we're $700+ million in one-time money that we're using to shore up the budget.
You're talking about for this year?
For this next year. And at some point, that came from the recommendation of the Budget Committee. And at some point, we're going to have to make those funds up. If we're going to continue using those dollars to provide services, those dollars have to become more than one-time money. They have to be sustaining funds, and eventually things will turn around. So that's the hazard with utilizing one-time money on recurring expenses. We don't like doing that. None of us enjoy doing that, but we have, I think, maintained the operation of state government at an adequate level, in many cases more than adequate given the circumstances we've been handed, and maintain those services for the people of the state without raising taxes and without cutting those services to the point where people really suffered. And that's what we'll continue to do. We'll utilize one-time money only when it's absolutely necessary, but this year about $700 million of our budget recommendation is one-time money for recurring expenses.
Let's talk on the optimistic side. If things do pick up, if the economy picks up steam, revenue levels rise to pre-recession levels, should we expect state spending then to rise and follow suit? Anyone?
Well, in the past it has. I mean, you know, when you were able to do those things that you've had to put off because you couldn't do them in years when the budget was tight and you had to make reductions. I mean, right now we're talking about reducing agencies by at least 1%. Every state agency out there next fiscal year as compared to this fiscal year, some a lot more than 1%. And we've got as our priority to try to shore up K through 12 and K through university funding, mental health, public safety, debt service, all of those things that we have to do. And at some point, we're going to have to increase the budgets in those areas that have taken those cuts in the years when they're lean. So, yeah, I would think that we will see some increased state spending when funds are available, but we have to be very careful not to do that until we know those funds are going to be sustaining.
Representative Watson, your take on the spending.
Well, you can only reduce budgets so much without having serious adverse effects on the delivery of services. And we have seen those budgets cut severely. And we're just, we are just hopeful and optimistic that as the economy improves, as the revenue increases, that we would continue to provide those essential services that government is expected to provide in the future. So, we just approach each month hopeful and, as I say, optimistic that the month would at least meet the revenue expectations, and that we won't have to do any more drastic cuts. So, we asked the citizens to try to understand that even though government is expected to deliver these services, we cannot do it without the revenue. So we are expected to do sometime more with less, but that's very difficult to do. So we just look at it on a month-to-month basis, positive enough to believe that things are going to improve and that we can begin to deliver those essential services at a level that it will not cause major problems in our state.
Well, still on that topic, we have an email now from Bernard from Jackson. Bernard asks, what will happen if the upcoming budget cuts cause any of the state-run agencies to not be able to operate anymore? Will furloughs or permanent layoffs happen as a result of any budget cuts? Representative Brown, do you want to take that one?
It's already happened. We already have furloughs, or not so many furloughs as we've had layoffs in state government. We had a report on the Appropriations Committee yesterday in the House from the Personnel Board about how many employees we have and how many employees we've lost, and we've downsized government. There's no question about that. The number of employees is down this year from what it was last year, and I can tell you on the K through 12 budget on the education system, 800 teachers have been non-renewed across the state, and an additional 1,200 school employees have been non-renewed, and that does not include the people that the positions that were vacated because people retired or quit for whatever reason that haven't been filled. So about 10% of our workforce in K through 12 education has been reduced since last year alone. So yeah, it's had an impact, and we've lost state employees, we've lost university employees, we've lost K-12 employees. We understand that had to happen, and we all agreed that had to happen. The legislature passed legislation that would allow that to happen, but it's not pretty and it does have consequences. I think we can sustain that for a year or so, but beyond that, you get to the point where you're really beginning to impact people's lives. For example, the Highway Patrol, they're down, 130 sworn officers right now, so there's some problems out there on the roads today. We've got to do something about Highway Patrol, mental health, Department of Human Services. We're under a court order to provide some additional services, and we haven't done that. We've got to provide for that. So we've got some difficulties, some challenges. None of us are proposing to raise taxes, but there are some challenges out there in the budget that we're going to have to meet over the next couple of years.
We have a caller on the line now. Walter from Meridian has a question for our panel. Walter, go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. Y'all talking about your budget. If somebody would look and see how they waste money at some of these agencies, state agencies, and the way they spend money and how they throw it away and how they waste it, especially East Mississippi State Hospital in Meridian. Somebody needs to investigate the way they spend their money because they're getting a lot of money. They're not spending it right, and that's the reason they take it out on the patients. They use the patients for an excuse to get money for this and that. But I just wish somebody could see the way they waste money over there. And I'm gonna hang up and listen.
I guess the question is there what type of oversight is in place, and is there government waste?
Walter, you know, there's no doubt that we can find some efficiencies in government. The Lieutenant Governor's led the charge on that and has a study committee to put together a package of efficiencies in government that I would like to see us adopt to do some consolidations and some cost sharing and those kinds of things to eliminate some of the so-called waste in government. Certainly we know that not every agency is as efficient as it should be, and there are probably some ways that we can make some changes to better qualify the spending and quantify the spending of everybody's tax dollars. But I think that the way to do that is not by reducing services, as the speakers before me have said, and not by furloughing people unless it's absolutely necessary, which it has been and will continue to be for a year or so. But if we could create some efficiencies and provide those same services at a lower cost, then that's what we need to do. And you know, I applaud the Lieutenant Governor and his staff and the people on that commission for putting together that package. And I hope that we can get some of those ideas through the system this year.
Senator Kirby?
Yes.
On the subject of oversight and government efficiency, do you think we have enough controls in place?
Well, I don't know that we have enough in place, but we do have a lot of control. There's no doubt about it. And you know, I really am proud of our state agencies. I know the gentleman was criticizing, but the agencies that I visited, most of them are really hard-working people that are very, very dedicated to their job. No matter what business you're in, you can be in any type business and you're going to have some people that carry the load. There's no doubt about it. There's some that want to work and some that don't. But overall, I've been very impressed with our state employees. I have several. I'm from Rankin County and probably have more state employees than any legislator up there. And I'm always visiting the state agencies. And I can tell you that those people that I visit, and they don't always know that I'm coming either, by the way, are very dedicated, hardworking state employees. And we have a lot of people that work in the Capitol building and surrounding buildings in the Capitol complex that live in my area. And I can tell you, we've had people at the Capitol building, employees there, that have spent the night working on deadline days, and no one ever says that. I mean, we just have some really, really good people, and I'm very proud of them. I'm not saying there isn't some waste. There's waste in anything that anyone does, and no matter who you are or what business you're in, you can always cut a little bit. But that little bit has just been a little bit each year, and it's getting to a point now that I don't think we can cut a whole heck of a lot more. You know, and another thing that you mentioned a while ago, talking about budgets and all for Mississippi, when I recently saw that Arizona was in such bad shape, and not just Arizona, a lot of the states, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of deficit, and you're talking about billions. I think one state like $22 billion deficit. And you know, we balance our budget. We don't run on deficits. So they're running on deficits every year and hoping for the best, and maybe someday may even try to get a federal government bailout, and good luck on that. But we're not doing that. We balance our budget every year. I'm proud of what we've done. The money that we've received, and the rainy day fund we had, the tobacco trust fund and all, we've spread that out over the last 4 years to make sure that we could provide the services needed to the people. Arizona, exact opposite. When I heard that Arizona had sold all their state office buildings and sold their own Capitol building and were leasing their Capitol building now, that tells me what good shape we're in and what good leadership we've had by some of our top leaders in Mississippi.
No question.
All right, we have another caller on the line. Kenny from Starkville. Kenny, go ahead with your question, please.
My question deals with K through 12 education primarily. When you cut a lot of budgets in the state, the budgets stay cut. When you cut K through 12 education, it's an indirect tax to the property owners because boards of education tend to pass those cuts along by increases in property taxes. How would the panel address that?
Representative Brown, why don't you start with that one?
That's a problem. Last year, according to the State Department of Education, or in the current year, 91 school districts out of 151 school districts have raised taxes. And we consistently talk about that. If we cut beyond a certain level, school districts will turn around and raise taxes on the local people. So when we talk about the fact that we haven't raised any taxes at the state level, what we're not telling everybody is local taxes have been raised. And it falls differently on different school districts. From the state level, when we fund everybody on the same level. When you do it on a local tax basis, that doesn't work that way. For example, in the city of Jackson, where my district is, we can't raise local property taxes. We're capped out. So there's no local tax increase, no local property tax increase for schools in the city of Jackson and the Jackson Public School District. In other districts, they'll raise taxes. In some districts, when they raise local property taxes, under the law, it doesn't raise enough money to make any difference. So it's a real problem. I agree with you. We're going to try to do what we can to hold level funding for K-12 education for at least the next year or so and see where we are. We're going to do everything we can, but you're exactly right. We're just passing, and it's not just in K-12 education. Unfortunately, there's a number of areas where we pass down local tax increases, not because we want to do it, but because we cut funding at the state level, and therefore local governments have had to make up some of the difference.
All right. Well, we have already heard the recommendations of the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. Their 2012 budget blueprint calls for 1% to 7% cuts for most agencies and programs compared to last year. It's a detailed proposal that avoids a one-size-fits-all sort of cut. Still, many experts believe the state should do more to tailor-fit budget cuts. The concept is called performance-based budgeting. The approach can help streamline programs, eliminate waste and duplication, and target budget cuts more carefully. Once again, here's Dr. Marianne Hill from the Institutions of Higher Learning.
When it comes time to make budgets, it seems that what happens is that there's a 5%, say, cut in all agencies that can be cut, as opposed to looking at some programs that might be doing very well, perhaps should be expanded, others that aren't doing as well should be shrunk. There should be some combining of functions. There are a lot of suggestions out there. From time to time, different people have made some very sound suggestions, some of which our governor has presented when he presented this year's budget recommendations. But it's that there's not the will to implement the performance-based budgeting when times are fairly good, so that it becomes, when it gets to be a crisis situation, we look at it more seriously.
Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant is a strong supporter of performance-based budgeting. So is Senate Appropriations Chair Doug Davis. He has authored a smart budgeting bill that takes performance into account. It will likely see a vote by the full Senate before the session ends. Senator Burton, you were on that committee with Doug Davis. What's your view of it?
I absolutely agree with the Lieutenant Governor. I authored the performance-based budgeting bill of 1994 that passed and became law. Performance-based budgeting is law in Mississippi. We've had performance measures in state budgets for years. Nobody's taken them seriously. I agree that they should be taken seriously. The buzzwords and those words that you hear associated with performance-based budgeting, benchmarks, outcomes, matrix, all those things are extremely important. And it doesn't take any of our ability to fund an agency away from us by asking agencies to meet certain performance marks, and if they don't meet those marks, then that program goes away. If it isn't functioning, if it isn't doing what it was intended to do, don't fund the program. We have a tendency not to do that if we don't have some benchmarks along the way. So performance-based budgeting should not only be enhanced in Mississippi, but it should be taken very seriously by the appropriators, and I'm one of those that believes that should happen.
Representative Watson, what's good, what's bad about performance-based budgeting?
Well, I think you can place a name on anything and say if we call it performance-based. I've heard various names associated with the budgetary process, but what you really do in the end, you look at each agency differently, and certainly you ask each agency head to justify every dollar that's appropriated to that particular agency. You look for areas, as we have during these very tough economic times. You look for areas where you can cut, and we have done that, whether that's travel, whether that's equipment, or other areas, and we have done that time and time again. But it's very difficult during these very tough times to just say, let's pass a bill and let's approach this in a different way when you really don't have the money right now, Holly, to adequately fund those agencies. So I really don't work on the appropriation side on a day-to-day basis. My intimate involvement in the appropriation process pretty much ends once the budget is crafted. But I know enough about the appropriations process to know that we are doing overall a very, very good job with the money that we have available to us, particularly when, as Chairman Kirby indicates, when you compare us with other states. We're doing a very adequate job of utilizing the resources, the limited resources that we have to provide the essential services that government is expected to provide. Now, there are people out there who say cut, 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 but when they travel the highways of the state of Mississippi and they don't see law enforcement officers, or, as has already been discussed, when we impose cuts at the K through 12 area that actually brings about an additional tax increase at the local level, that is when you see the results of various cuts. So we continue to strive and to do better, and we certainly welcome the input of all of the citizens of this state as we deal with this challenge.
Wilson, let me mention, though, it's not just performance-based budgeting. One of the myths surrounding performance-based budgeting is that it means cut an agency. That's not what performance-based budgeting means. Performance-based budgeting would also reward agencies who do well. And I think that if we could come up with a proposal, again, like the Lieutenant Governor when he was state auditor proposed and I introduced into the legislature, if we could allow a state agency to retain half of any ending cash balance to use in the next fiscal year or beyond, and turn half of it back over to the state. Something like that to reward a state agency for performing well and doing well, coming up with ways to save money, rewarding employees in some way, shape, form, or fashion that's constitutionally sound, that come up with ideas in how to save and how to be more efficient. That's all a part of performance-based budgeting. It's not just cut an agency because it isn't performing. It's about rewarding good performance.
You are watching Quorum on MPB Television and mpbonline.org. We hope you'll call in with your questions. The toll-free phone number is 1-877-405-5247. You can also email us at quorum@mpbonline.org or follow us on Twitter. And we were talking about performance-based budgeting. Representative Brown, what's wrong with what Senator Burton was suggesting?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it in concept. And we're going to take a hard look at it on the House side. I can tell you we've had lengthy discussions about it. But, you know, let's look at some examples out there in the real world of performance-based budgeting. People always point to the state of Texas. The state of Texas has a $27 billion deficit. We don't have that in Mississippi. The state of Texas has performance-based budgeting. $27 billion budget deficit over a 2-year period of time. The difficulty is always in the implementation of any program that you come up with. You know, for example, let's suppose that we underfund an agency, but we set targets out there that are unrealistic, and we say, well, you didn't meet your targets, so we're going to cut your budget. Well, you've cut the budget, but they didn't reach their targets because you didn't give enough money to begin with. So I'm not saying anybody would do that deliberately. I'm simply saying that it's not as easy as it sounds to implement a budget like that, and it's particularly difficult, and as Chairman Watson said, in the times we're in today, where we really don't have enough money to fund the vital services of government overall. All agencies that perform vital services, state government, are underfunded today. So we're going to take a hard look at it. We are not, on the House side, I'm certainly not, I'm a CPA. I mean, I understand how it works, but I'm certainly not opposed to it. In fact, I co-chaired a commission that a former state auditor put together to look at performance-based budgeting, zero-based budgeting, outsourcing and all that. I'm supportive of all those things. It's just incredibly difficult to make those kind of major changes when we're in a budget crisis like we are today.
We have a caller on the line with a question. Joseph joins us from Oxford. Joseph, what's your question, please?
I'm a part-time dishwasher at a very national restaurant, and I beg for work. I made $90 for 2 weeks, sir. I understand that things are very, very tough in the economy, and I appreciate what you gentlemen are doing. But what happens when, like, I go to apply and I'm saying, well, I have a job, but I don't know my hours because I show up for work, and then they say, well, we don't need you. Go home. Sir, gentlemen, I don't know what to do.
So I guess a question out of that would be if you have trouble finding a job with steady employment where you can where you can trust your employer and have a reliable job. It's the ultimate question of finding a job that you can stick with.
Well, if I may, we all know it's difficult, and there are a lot of people that are really suffering right now, and that doesn't make it any easier on you, and I understand that. But I will say that we're doing everything we can to help you, and especially in North Mississippi. We've passed some tremendous bills that have helped North Mississippi with manufacturing plants such as the Toyota and Schultz, and was it Cervicor? I'm trying to remember. Eurocopter. I mean, we've done several things in North Mississippi, especially to create new jobs. And you know, when you're talking about a plant, QUORUM is another. So we've had several. But the good part about these manufacturing plants, if you don't get a job with them, you could very easily, possibly get a job with one of the companies that does business with them. And the spinoff business is fantastic. A manufacturing plant that has 1,000 employees may have 15,000 other jobs created because of it. And you know, we're excited about the businesses that we're bringing into Mississippi, and we're doing it through incentives. And we're doing it through loans. We're not giving money away by any means. We're loaning money, and the money is always guaranteed. We're not going to do things as they used to be done in the legislature in the state of Mississippi. And we're making sure that we have the clawback provisions and the things that are necessary for the state and the taxpayers not to lose money. And I feel real good about that. We've just recently done one, matter of fact, in Chairman Watson's hometown of Hattiesburg. And that's going to be fantastic. It's a building that had been vacant for years, and we've created 1,000 new jobs there. And that will create other jobs. So, you know, we're doing all that we can to create new jobs, and I think that's the secret. If you can give the tax credits that are necessary, the local governments are working very hard with the state to make sure that they get these businesses, and I feel real good about the direction we're headed. And things are tough. Matter of fact, I've been bleeding today, as you can see. It's tough all over. So you know, we feel like we're headed in the right direction during a difficult time. And I'm sorry that your situation is as it is, but I can promise you we're trying to make it better for you.
Representative, let me ask you a question quickly. I mean, seems to me Joseph would be a perfect candidate to go to one of the WIN job centers.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure, Joseph, if you're aware of that program, but you can call the Employment Security Commission in your area, one of the offices, or call the State Department of Employment Security. And they've got WIN job centers there that will help walk you through the process to help you apply for and hopefully obtain one of those jobs that Senator Kirby was talking about.
And Wilson, on the issue of jobs, the governor, the Mississippi Development Authority, the leadership of these two gentlemen, Representative Watson, Senator Kirby, in their roles as chairman of Ways and Means and Finance respectively, and the legislature as a whole, we have, I think, done a relatively good job, I think even exceptional job in this tight budget times when the economy has been in such a slump. We've had several announcements over the last couple of years, 3 years, with Toyota coming online and all of these others that Senator Kirby mentioned, and other projects out there. And one of the things that we fail to remember is we have the most educable workforce out there, and we take people who have jobs like Joseph has and turn them into really good paying, tax-paying citizens through our workforce training with our community colleges and the WIN job centers and their assistance that they give them. We have a lot of opportunities for people out there that maybe you just don't know about. But I want to congratulate and thank our workforce training folks at the community colleges for the job they do, because one of the things that I keep hearing over and over and over every time we hear from a company that locates here is our workforce is the best. And that's a direct reflection on the ability of our people to learn what it takes to do the job, and the folks at the community colleges and our other universities in training those folks to do them.
One of the problems we have in Mississippi is that there are resources available. These resources have been mentioned by my colleagues on this panel that the people are not aware of. Obviously, I believe that perhaps Joseph is not aware of a lot of the resources that are available. And I really, what I want Joseph to do is call one of us who are here, call your local legislator, connect with your junior college, with any employment service that you have at the local level, because many times you can improve your situation with education that's provided by the institutions of higher learning or the local school system or the community colleges. Please utilize the resources that are available to you, and please be encouraged to call your local legislator about any particular problem that you might have with state government.
Well, Senator Burton, you mentioned the state loans that bring these companies in, yet we're in a tight economy. And Representative Watson, you strongly supported the bond measure to bring that solar panel production company that we mentioned to Forest County. But given the tight economy, can we afford these loans to these companies to locate here?
Well, the real question is, can we afford not to go out here and bring in these high-paying jobs for Mississippians? And that particular project in Hattiesburg will not cost the state of Mississippi in the end any money. It's a $75 million loan. They will pay back the principal amount, plus they'll pay back the interest on the bond indebtedness. So, and other states are competing for those type of high-tech companies. So we have no choice but to involve ourselves in that competition, because ultimately our goal is to create more jobs so we can create more taxpayers, so that we can create more revenue for state government. If we create more taxpayers, then we don't have to worry about increasing taxes, because the revenue will increase as a consequence of the creation of additional jobs. So we're in we're competing with all of our states insofar as competing for industry, and at the same time we're competing with other countries. So it is vitally necessary for us to bring in additional employment opportunities so our citizens will have jobs that pay $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year.
Yeah, just the one in Hattiesburg was 1,000 new jobs with an average salary of $46,000 a year. That's fantastic. I'm excited about that, and all the people in Hattiesburg, I'm sure, are.
Mm-hmm. A couple of you have mentioned junior colleges. We have an email from Mark, and Mark asks, if the state is in such bad shape, why is it every college and junior college is continuously building? I've heard before that it comes from private donations. We'll let them use those donations to operate their respective schools and get out of the taxpayers' back pocket. There are too many small public K-12 schools in horrible condition in this state that could use that money. I wonder how many colleges would like to hold classes in their local K-12 schools. There's several issues addressed there, but what about the money that's available for construction, but apparently not for other things?
Well, I serve on the Facilities Management Committee, Joint Committee of the House and Senate, members of the Public Properties Committees in the chambers. And we tour the facilities every year, and I'm going to tell you something. There are a lot of building needs out there. For example, when a community college increase in enrollment measures, 20% over a period of a year, and that science building was built 40 years ago to accommodate, 300 students, and now they've got 2,000 students, you've got to have building programs. There's no way you cannot have those. In many instances, particularly on the university campuses, but also on community college campuses around the state, people will make donations for a specific project. We will donate this for a like the Pain Center down at USM, or the Performing Arts Complex up at Itawamba Community College, and that big gymnasium up there that was a donated project. These are the type things that that people want to do as a way to assist the community college, and it's tied to a certain project or and it's private donations. They're foundation funds that are used for that type of thing. We do have building needs out there on our community college campuses. The one thing we can't afford to do is turn anybody away. We cannot afford to say we don't have the facilities to accommodate you, go to the neighboring state or take it online or do something else. We've got to be able to accommodate those who wish to get further their education, and one of the ways we have to do that is to meet some of the building programs. There are buildings out there that need roofs today. We've got to get those done. We have buildings that need HVAC systems. We've got to get those done. We've got to get them green. We've got to get them energy efficient. We've got to build because the enrollment is up. There are a lot of reasons for building. It's not just to say we're building another building. There's a need out there in many, many cases, and I think most of the cases that you hear about is an absolute need that it occur.
Yeah, and our community colleges are growing so rapidly, and one of the reasons, of course, more and more children are going to college now, but during these tough times, they just can't afford to go to a four-year university. And the only thing they can afford is to stay home and go to a community college. And so because of that, we're having tremendous growth in that. And I understand that, and we're doing all we can to help those community colleges with that growth. I told Dr. Muse at Hines one time, you were always trying to grow. I said, you're kind of like the dog chasing the car. Now you've caught the car, what are you going to do with it? And they've got more students than they can handle. So, it's going to be tough times for them.
Wilson, we have a very rational approach to, and I'm not on Ways and Means, but I can talk about the work of these two gentlemen. We have a very rational approach to funding construction projects in Mississippi that goes through several layers of due diligence. We've got the Department of Finance and Administration. Every agency, including the community colleges, submits their priorities to them. Then these two gentlemen work on priorities looking at the community colleges. You've got the Community College Board. You've got the IHL Board. 25 years ago, you would see community colleges competing with each other for construction projects. You don't see that today. What you see today is a group that comes together and makes recommendations, and we fund it on not only an as-needed basis, but as ability to fund basis, if I can say it that way. It's a very rational approach, and I think we do you guys do a terrific job of keeping that under control. It could spiral out of control because the needs are far greater than the money we have to fund those projects, as Senator Burton has said. But these guys have kept it under control, and we're making progress. It's just very expensive.
And as Senator Bryan mentioned last week, now is the time because of the the interest rates and so forth. If you're going to do some building and do some borrowing and do some loaning to get new businesses here, get projects going on campuses, now's the time to do it. Of course, within reason. You don't want to go crazy with it, but now's the time to do some of these things. What else does it do? Provides jobs to Mississippians in building these projects.
All right, let's go to the phone lines now. Catherine calling from Biloxi. Catherine, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, my question is, if y'all cut any further on social services, what do people who live just on their disability, and it's not much of a disability, it's $745 a month, which it doesn't really pay for housing here on the Gulf Coast, what are they going to do? I know that a lot of them are becoming homeless. So what are you doing toward that end? I know I myself will be homeless as of Monday.
There are some very unique challenges on the coast, particularly after the recovery that's been going on since the major disaster of 2005. And I feel for the continuing recovery down there, particularly the home situation and the housing situation there. It's very expensive. Insurance is outrageous. But as far as the disability payments, that's out of our purview. We don't deal with those payments. That's the Social Security Administration. That's a federal issue. So I can't answer your particular question on disability. But we've done everything we can to maintain the level of services through the Department of Human Services with our state dollars and directing those federal dollars for energy assistance and those types of things. But as far as your disability is concerned, that's above our pay grade here. That's going to be on the national level.
You may want to check with your local office of the Department of Rehabilitation Services. They work with disabled individuals, and they offer services that many of us are not even aware of. But this is, and of course, this is probably a primarily federally financed agency, but at the same time, it works with Mississippians, and that's what I encourage people to do. Some of the time, the solution to your problem or an improvement of your situation is right in your community, but you are not aware of it. So I would encourage you to check with the Department of Rehabilitation Services. And as a matter of fact, if you would just call the Capitol 359-3343-601, I'll try to direct you in an area where you can get some local benefit from some existing agency.
Representative Watson, some cities are asking the state lawmakers to approve new local sales taxes to improve their local budgets. What's your take on that?
Well, we've already done it for the city of Jackson. Mm-hmm. We've done it for the city of Tupelo. I understand Jackson has not had the local referendum on its sales tax increase, and each and every year we are presented with those requests. They don't make it very far in the legislative process because we don't know what the future holds with respect to state government, and there is some opposition to giving the local authorities the any additional sales tax.
But ultimately, something like that rests in the hands of the voters, does it not? They have to vote on whether they want it locally.
Well, it first have to come to the legislature.
Right.
And we look at each and every individual request very closely. I would say right now, if I supported it and brought it up before the Ways and Means Committee, I believe it would probably be voted down, just because of the fiscal situation that we're in, and the fact that every municipality wants an additional sales tax increase, and that would mean that the legislature would be participating in that, and at the same time, we just don't know what the future holds with respect to state government and its needs for additional revenues.
All right, Senator Kirby, your take on the local option.
Well, you know, it's almost a weekly thing with me where someone says no more taxes, none for anything. We do not want any tax increases. You know, that's about as plain as you can get it. And I think during this economy, during this time, the message is clear. After the last election that we had, I think it was very clear people are tired of paying more and more in taxes, and they want results, not more taxes. And I'm like Chairman Watson. The committee members I've talked to in the finance committees are very clear about it, asking me, most all of them have asked me not to bring out any tax bills for anything. And I don't see that that it would pass the Finance Committee for any local option sales tax this year. I'm not saying what will happen in the future as the economy changes, but this year it's not there. I think we brought it on the floor. It would fail. The House bill that I think it was a House bill, may have been a Senate bill, I can't remember, for the city of Jackson back a couple of 2 or 3 years ago. After a 2-hour debate at the podium, it passed by 1 vote. And that was only because I think at that time they, well, I know for a fact it's because we had a commission that was overseeing that. Without that commission, it would have never passed. So, you know, I think under the stipulations that we would pass one, if it were to even pass in the legislature, I'm not sure the cities would want it.
I have a different take on that. As a former local government official, I was mayor of Newton before I joined the ranks of the Senate in 1992. The only opportunity we have at the local level in this state is user fees, garbage, water, sewer, and property taxes. That's the only way you can fund local government in Mississippi. Now, we already have a hodgepodge of taxes. I saw a news report last night about the city of Pearl. In one part of town, it's 9% sales tax on food. Across 100 yards away, it's 7% in the same town. So we already have a hodgepodge of taxes. You know why it's that way? Because the people of Pearl chose to do that. I have absolutely no problem with passing a bill that says the local option sales tax is available if the supermajority of people vote for it, and let them tax themselves. How much better can it be? We're not taxing them. The people are choosing how they want to pay their taxes. We sat here just a few minutes ago and heard that schools, districts, are having to raise property taxes. Let's lower that burden a little bit. Let's let everybody pay a share. And you do that with a local option sales tax. And if the legislature says, here it is, cities, call a referendum on it. If the people want it, there you go. Then you can avoid raising property taxes for these issues over here because you're already having to raise them for the schools over here. I think that property taxes are going to go out of sight if we don't give cities and counties some options on taxation.
All right, we have a caller who's been waiting to ask a question. Elaine in French Camp. Elaine, go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, I'll just be real brief, and maybe you can answer this for me. I watched the President's State of the Union address, and I'm wondering, as you set the budget and look where you can cut and how would be the best for the direction of Mississippi this year and in succeeding years, are you planning also for what could come from Congress as the President addressed as major cuts throughout everything? And by the way, it's great to see Senator Burton back up in good health. But, are you keeping this in mind? Thank you.
Cuts on the federal level, how they'll affect Mississippi. Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take that up. We've been looking at it in the House, not so much from the President's speech last night. We haven't really had a chance to digest that. But I can tell you this business about cutting out earmarks is going to devastate Mississippi unless they can figure out a way around it. I mean, we got, I don't remember the number, $1 billion worth of earmarks that we're going to lose. And it's going to hurt not only major projects in terms of buildings at the University Medical Center, for example, but some ongoing programs. So this business at the federal level about cutting out earmarks, we've been one of the major beneficiaries of earmarks in the past, and on our side, we're very concerned about that, and we're trying to look at, when we're talking to agencies about what their budgets are going to look like next year and the following year, one of the things we're asking them is, in terms of federal funds that are going to fall out because of the cut in earmarks, how are you going to handle that? So we're very much concerned about that.
And this is what happens when you remove federal earmarks. Those needs are going to still be there at the local level, at the Mississippi level, and those needs are going to have to be addressed by the taxpayers of this state. And so that's the bad thing about it. It sounds good to say, well, we're going to get rid of earmarks, Mississippi will have no earmarks, but right now we have major construction all across the state at all of the 8 institutions of higher learning. This construction is financed by the federal government, but if this construction, if this money is deleted, then if that need is still there, then that construction, those facilities are going to have to be financed through general obligation bonds, and that's going to be a responsibility, financial responsibility of the citizens of this state.
One of the things that Congress is wrestling with right now is exactly what is an earmark. Is it funding for determining the migration patterns of the great horned toad? Is that an earmark, or is an earmark the infrastructure improvements in the city of Newton to replace the sewer system that is so badly needed? Is that an earmark that is equal to that other earmark I mentioned? No, it's not. And I think Congress needs to identify exactly what they think an earmark is so that we know what we'll be dealing with. But, if we're going to build airplanes, let's say we're going to build ships for the Navy, and Mississippi gets the contract, is that an earmark? In some people's eye, yes, because Mississippi got it and somebody else didn't. But we've got the facility down there to do the job. So those types of things can't be equated with some of these other wasteful spending issues that people identify as earmarks. So I think Congress needs to really get to work on exactly what an earmark is so that we'll know what we'll be dealing with.
It's going to be a real problem. I mean, ports and airports, for example, in Mississippi have benefited greatly from earmarks for our airports, local airports, and for our ports in the state. Sure. And if you just look at the percentage of money for construction that's gone into ports and airports here, it's going to be really rough for them to be able to survive without that.
Yeah, and of course, what's the difference in pork and earmarks?
Yeah.
Pork is when it's in another person stay or help someone else, and an earmark is required or necessary earmarks when it's for you. And we all know that. I mean, if it's no matter how bad they need it in another state, or if it's not our state, it's pork or it's an earmark.
But there's some obvious difference between some of them. I mean, we see stories about these bridges to nowhere and projects like that don't seem to have any.
And that's just wrong.
That's
we
pork.
should
That's
stop
wasteful.
that.
And by the way,
and we don't do that. The federal government does.
That's exactly right.
Look,
we
Senator
don't do
Cochran
those
has
things.
been the champion for Mississippi, and he has, I think, philosophically been opposed to this whole idea. He's gone along with it because he felt like he needed to go along with whatever reason. But if you listen to him, I mean, look at the things he's designated for Mississippi. I mean, he's made this state a far better place to live, and far better for all of us by his ability to direct money to the state of Mississippi for specific projects. And I would challenge anybody to look at any one of the projects, any one of the earmarks that Senator Cochran's designated and call it pork. Just didn't happen.
Exactly. The project was going to happen somewhere.
Right.
He made sure it happened here.
Right.
That's the difference.
All right, gentlemen, the hour has quickly passed us by. That is all the time we have for tonight. And I would, of course, like to thank our guests, Representatives Cecil Brown and Percy Watson, and Senators Terry Burton and Dean Kirby. We also thank you for joining the discussion. We'll soon have this edition of Quorum available for viewing online at mpbonline.org. Quorum returns next Wednesday at 7 with more coverage of the legislature 2011 and the state's budget crisis. I'm Wilson Stribling. Good night.